Ghost, or indeed Ghost BC, are a bunch of Swedish godbotherers mischievously concocted by the mind of Tobias Forge, a vocalist known from such bands as Repugnant and Subvision. In 2006, while fast asleep in his native town of Linköping, Tobias had dark and sinister music reverberating throughout his dreams. One particular night, a riff came to him that he spontaneously decided to put to paper. This song would become Stand By Him. The idea for Ghost came about after Tobias wrote a few more songs similar in tone to Stand By Him, and wanted to have them recorded and produced. During the recording process, Tobias became interested in forming a musical entity around these songs. He originally wanted to be the guitarist of the band, but after several fellow musicians declined the role, Tobias stepped up to the altar and created a demonic anti-hero called Papa Emeritus, a crooning satanic pope that Forge would perform as for the band. Deciding to use masks and makeup to create a fitting aesthetic for the band also gave them the option of anonymity, which they took. Ghost BC's imagery was heavily inspired by vintage horror films such as Hammer Horror and obvious satire of Catholicism, with a dash of old-school shock rock added for good measure. Despite the band's appearance looking like a true cult black metal group, their music is actually reminiscent of bands like Blue Oyster Cult, and to a lesser degree, Black Sabbath. Other inspirations of Ghost include the Beatles, ABBA, and Depeche Mode. Some of Tobias's vocal inspirations come from such unlikely places as Tori Amos, Greg Graffin of Bad Religion, and David Gilmour. Starting from today, I will be going deep into the discography of Ghost. Over the next few months we will have quite a lot to cover. Let's begin with Opus Eponymous. Opus Eponymous, Latin for the self-titled work, which I'm sure is meant to be some kind of funny joke on the band's part, is the debut full-length of Ghost, released on October 18th, 2010. It begins with Deus Culpa, a spooky melody played on a church organ, that functions as a short opening to the album. Sets the aesthetic very nicely for what is to come. This is followed by Conclavi con Dio. After a punchy bass line overlaid with what sounds like a Hammond organ, Papa Emeritus announces his arrival. We are here for your praise, evil one. Ghost, even from day one, had an impeccable knack for a good hook, and this song is loaded with them. Even at some points mixing sinister Italian chanting into a section that you'll find yourself humming if you aren't careful. Third track, Ritual, feels very much like a Blue Oyster Cult song with added evil. Sounds like a cheery stroll through the chapel until Papa laments on the smells of human sacrifices that infest the building. Despite this uplifting hook of the song's chorus, there is some truly messed up lyrics in this little ditty about a ritualistic killing in the name of Satan. This chapel of ritual smells of dead human sacrifices from the altar. Fourth track, Elizabeth, is based on Elizabeth Bathory, a Hungarian noblewoman who tortured and killed hundreds of young women between 1585 and 1609, because she believed that bathing in the blood of the youthful would give her eternal beauty and health. In this song, Papa fawns in adoration of Miss Bathory and yearns for her resurrection, claiming that her lust for blood makes her one of us. This is probably the closest to a love song you'll ever hear from Ghost. fifth track, Stand By Him, is a devilish ode to a witch trial, wherein the witch devotes herself to him, meaning Satan, as a bid for revenge against her prosecutors.
Tis the night of the witch. Tis the night of the witch tonight. And the vengeance is hers for as long as she stands by him.
Towards the midsection of the song there is a quote delivered by Papa that is from a witch hunter's guidebook called Malleus Maleficarum, aka The Hammer Against Witches, written by Jacob Sprenger and Heinrich Kramer. This song has the distinction of being the very first written by Forge for Ghost as a band project. The lyrics could have either been ripped straight from one of his twisted dreams, or just the result of his dark imagination. I'll leave that for the want of speculation. Sixth track, Satan Prayer, is, wait for it, yet another satanic serenade, which mostly focuses on the spiritual aspect of the creator versus the destroyer. Emeritus at some point mentions the Nicene Creed, which is essentially a Christian prayer, of which he claims to have his own infernal version of.
Hear our Satan prayer, our anti-Nicene creed. Hear our Satan prayer, for the coming of seed.
In the booklet that comes with the album, it is interesting to note that the coming of seed that Papa is referring to is spelt with a U rather than an O, another example of Tobias trolling. Seventh track, Death Knell. The song title is a reference to the tolling of a bell that announces one's death. Papa repeatedly alludes to this a number of times throughout the song. There is also a heavy theme of fornication with the devil and the propagation of his sport.
666, receive the beast of
So, the long and short of it is that you are Satan's bitch and you're feeding his kids after birthing 1,000 of them apparently. Sucks to be you. Eighth track, Prime Mover, very much like several other tracks on the album, deals with the conception of the Antichrist, this time making reference to a secretive nun being obsessed with a varicose phallus, presumably belonging to the big guy in hell himself. The ninth and final song of the album is an instrumental track called Genesis, no doubt inspired by that part of the biblical arc. It has no lyrics, but is written in such a progressive style that you find yourself conjuring images within your mind like some sort of satanic fantasia. The mix of analog synths, acoustic guitars and theremins creates quite an epic climax. The Japanese version of this album had a spookified version of the Beatles' Here Comes the Sun as a bonus track. I'm not sure if they had the right to do this, but could they have renamed their cover as Here Comes the Sun? It's a missed opportunity. Both words sound the same, so it would have worked so well.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright.
In the booklet, you'll see that all writing credits are given to a Ghoul writer, which is Forge, and later editions of this album reflect this. So in a nutshell, that's Opus Eponymous, the first Ghost album. Hello and welcome back to what I think is the only retrospective on Ghost or Ghost BC that's currently on YouTube. Here is a short rundown of what today's episode is covering. We will be going deep into Ghost's sophomore offering, Infestus Amam, and also a small EP released around the same time called If You Have Ghost. But first, let's head into the world of branding and legalities concerning the band's name that is Ghost. Back in early 2013, Ghost ran into a dispute over their band name conflicting with that of another's. The parent company of Ghost's record label at the time, Loma Vista, advised the band to alter their name, only slightly adopting the acronym BC, which depending on who you talk to could either mean Before Christ or Because Copyright. Ever since about mid-2015, they have no longer been obligated to use the term BC in their band name and have defaulted back to their original name Ghost. Despite all the legal documentation still containing BC, this means that merchandise and promotional adverts will use Ghost, while everything else will still be under Ghost BC. So you'll notice as you gaze at the cover of Ghost's second album, Infestis a Man, that the band are known as Ghost BC. This is the only time an album has printed the band name as Ghost BC. Infestis a Man is the sophomore record of Ghost, released on April the 10th, 2013, Latin for the most hostile. If Opus Eponymous was a record about the coming of the Antichrist, then Infestis a Man is a concept album about his birth and presence in the world. The album opens with the title track of the same name, a twisted version of a Christian hymn sung by the only choir left in America that didn't refuse the job, the Trident Tenors of Tinseltown. The next track, Per Aspera ad Inferi, Latin for Through Hardship to Hell, albeit a few grammatical errors, that being that Inferum would be more accurate, is Satan's motivational anthem. It's the kind of tune that old Nick would blast at the gym on his Brimstone iPod.
Per aspera ad inferi, per aspera ad inferi.
Third track, Secular Haze, references a world that has lost its faith and is oblivious to the coming mist that would be the Antichrist's influence. As is God in popular culture omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, so is the fog that would envelop the world. Fourth track, Gigolo Ha Megiddo, roughly translates to the Whore of Megiddo, which is an ancient Israeli city. Megiddo in Greek can also be translated as Armageddon, which gives this song a double meaning and could also be read as the male prostitute of the apocalypse, which fits the lyrics perfectly. The lyrics are written as if collected by multiple people, constantly switching from first person to third person and back again. The first person sections are the Antichrist boasting about his sexual machismo, referring to himself as richly endowed, while the third person sections are his admirers, referring to him as the enticer or the desacralizer. This is basically a song about the Antichrist hawking his way through the holy city during the end times, making such allusions as harvesting the crops of fields that others have ploughed, asserting that however fair and pure, you crave the wand, and shortly after proclaiming his demonic essence to be the magic potion Nevius. Nevius could also be a term used for snow. Fifth track, Gulay Zombie Queen. Gulay is a word associated with Arabian folklore, and in the West would be likened to a female ghoul. The female ghoul in this narrative was once a living woman of royalty before being entombed after her death. Seeming to not enjoy this very much, our zombie queen rises out of her tomb to usurp her throne, One thing I really love about this tune is it starts as a morbid slow ballad, but by the end it's an upbeat, lively crescendo.
Resistia, once a majesty, now exposing bone. Up from the stinking dirt she rises, ghastly pale.
Sixth track, Year Zero, begins with the choir chanting a variety of infernal names. Papa Emeritus, for this album known as Papa Emeritus II, launches into a scathing critique of humanity, claiming it to be blind and parasitic. He then orders humanity to repeat after him in rejoice of Year Zero, Hail Satan and all. The song ends with a sort of satanic to-do list, involving the corruption of institutions, the falling of kingdoms, and eventually the absolution of the father of lies above the house of God. Seventh track, Body and Blood. As you'd have guessed, the title is indeed a reference to the communion, but this song is a dark parody of the sacrament, and is meant in a far more literal way. Take for example this particular section of the song wherein Papa describes the process of consumption followed by defecation in context of worship. Eighth track, Idolatrine, is a portmanteau of the words idol and latrine or toilet. The song is a pretty explicit attack on Christian hypocrisy throughout the ages. Papa remarks that the so-called holiest of the holy are usually the ones to wag their finger at others after being abusive to children or being complicit in the abuse of children.
Idolatry for the imbeciles. Idolatry.
Ninth track, Depth of Satan's Eyes, is the point of the album where the Antichrist's influence is very apparent to society, and he has become a cult symbol in culture and a prophet of the time. This track performs very much as the son proselytizing for his father's rule.
Into the ice of fire, into the gates ablaze, into the burning light of Satan's rays.
10th and final track, Monstrance Clock, is a reference to a Christian display case that would be used to hold items of religious significance. This song is about mankind's collective resignation and acceptance of the new dawn. There is no resistance, all minds are aligned. There is no hope but to come together for Lucifer's son. Though I do not see the connection, Forge has claimed that this is about the female orgasm. Another notable fact about this song is that most concerts usually end when this is played.
Come together, together as one. Come together for Lucifer's son.
So that was Infestus Amam, Ghost's second album. It hit number 1 in the Swedish charts and went gold in 2014 after hitting over 20,000 sales worldwide. About 6 months later after the release of Infestus Amam, Ghost released a small EP of covers called If You Have Ghost. The title of the EP comes from its first track, which is a cover of an old country song by Roky Erickson from 1981.
If you have ghosts, you have everything. You can say anything you want, and you can do anything you want to do if you have ghosts.
Track 2 of the EP is a very wicked version of the ABBA song I'm a Marionette from 1977. This particular one is a favourite of mine because, unlike the original, which is very much a cutesy love song, Ghost used their signature sound to play into the more manipulative lyrics, creating an atmosphere of real unpleasantness.
I'm a marionette, just a marionette, pull the strings. I'm a marionette, everybody's pet, just as long as I sing.
Third track, Crucified, is a cover of fellow Swedes' Army of Lovers' biggest hit. This is Ghost's opportunity to have yet another pop at the Christian narrative.
I'm crucified, crucified like my Savior, saint-like behavior, a lifetime I pray.
Fourth track, Waiting for the Night, is from Depeche Mode circa 1990, and is the only cover on the EP that has similarities in tone to the original, decidedly opting to keep the gothic tone that 90s Depeche Mode were known for.
I am waiting for the night to fall. I know that it will save us all. When everything's dark, keeps us from
The final track of the EP is a live version of Secular Haze recorded at Music Hall of Williamsburg in Brooklyn, New York. Time of recording is unknown. The EP was produced by Dave Grohl of Nirvana and Foo Fighters fame. He also performed drums for I'm a Marionette and Waiting for the Night, and he played rhythm guitar for If You Have Ghosts alongside with the band.
And then it said Satan. I was like, what?
wow. You have everything if you have ghosts. You have everything if you have ghosts. You have everything if you have ghosts. You have everything.
The third album is usually a make or break time for any band. They have to either do what got them there better or completely reinvent themselves, while keeping their core identity intact. Good evening, I am Mayumi, and this is the third part in my Ghost retrospective series. We covered the debut and the sophomore recently, so it's time to throw ourselves ever so darkly at Ghost's third album, Meliora. But before we do that, we need to set the scene, take in the surroundings, the atmosphere that unearths such forbidden delights. It was late 2015. The relationship between Papa and the Ghouls was sour. We did not know it at the time, but the entire band still had hidden identities, even Forge. But these were completely different Ghouls, and they had recently filed a pay dispute case against Forge, claiming that they contributed to not only live performances but also the writing of songs, and therefore were entitled to a higher pay cut. The Ghouls lost this case when it was proven that they weren't the same Ghouls that had been present at the formation of the band. Some had not even been with the band at the time that writing for the third album began. This revelation came when the Ghouls revealed their identities during the case, which forced Papa to reveal his. Now that Tobias Forge had been vindicated at the cost of his anonymity, he went on the offensive, declaring that, and I quote, "None of the musicians are irreplaceable or crucial. I have no legal partnership with them. They are merely paid to perform the musical works that I have written." As I speak, this court case is still in progress. Those set of Ghouls appealed against the Swedish court's verdict, claiming that the judge that presided over the case was biased in favour of Forge due to suspected links between them to Freemasonry. This is speculation only, none of it is proven, and let's be honest, if it was, would it change the fact that the case was thrown out due to all the numbers adding up? Let me know in the comments, I guess. Now we will turn our gaze towards the band's third album, Meliora, which, as its Latin title suggests, felt bigger, better, and all round improved. Opus Eponymous told us that the Antichrist was coming. Infestus Amam let us witness his presence, and Meliora will show us the absence of God. Released in August the 21st of 2015, this album had everything you'd expect of a Ghost album, yet held a lot of surprises. New sounds, new ideas, new Papa. Among the usual promotions for the album, Ghost started getting creative here on YouTube, uploading short whimsical videos demonstrating that Ghost's tongue-in-cheek, not-so-serious side was still alive and well. Meliora begins with Spirit, a thunderous march written about alcohol, absinthe in particular, and the wonders of getting lost under its influence, with Papa as a guiding hand. He refers to absinthe a number of times, calling it a green muse, the apparatus for soul mobility, and my personal favourite, Anti-Saint Wormwood catapulting your mind.
Throw yourself into the vessel of possibilities.
The second track, From the Pinnacle to the Pit, is pretty much a retelling of the story of Lucifer, a high-level angel in the service of God, who was exiled after questioning his superiority. This track celebrates perseverance, confidence, and independence, as it describes how Satan got his groove back. The music video for the song featured slightly altered scenes from the 1927 classic sci-fi film Metropolis. The film is set in a futuristic city that lies above a bleak underworld populated by slaves. A utopia literally powered by slavery. Very symbolic of the heaven that is sold to people, as opposed to the reality.
You are cast out from the heavens to the ground, black and feathers falling down.
Third track, Cerise, fuck knows. But a few things we do know about this tempting sonnet are that at the time of speaking, Tobias Forge still thinks that this is the best song he has written thus far. The title is an Old English word for church. Though this is only one possible meaning, it could also be the name of the young girl that the song appears to be about. A young girl guilted and domesticated by her Christian faith, being reached out to by Papa, and by extension the devil. First he calls to her by telling her that he can feel her presence, and asking her if she can feel the rumble that's calling, something that he later clarifies lies within her. Papa comforts her by inferring, "I know your soul is not tainted, even though you've been told so." Midway through the track, Papa's friendly, seductive demeanour becomes manipulative, as he tells her, "Can't you see that you're lost without me?" This track to me demonstrates exactly how people end up falling into cults and certain types of religious groups. Language plays a powerful part. If you can balance freedom and purpose against their better wishes, you can lead them right into the complete opposite, and leave them thinking that just about any sacrifice is serving them a better life, as opposed to being nothing more than a puppet of someone else's goals.
I can feel the thunder that's breaking in your heart. I can see through the scars inside you.
After Cerise or Cerise, whatever the fuck it's called, there is a brief instrumental called Spoke Sonat, or the Ghost Sonata, a chilling melody played on a harp that leads us into track 5, He Is. He Is played as a straight up church hymn, just with a different subject of worship. It's Satan. The tone is so angelic and innocent sounding compared to the lyrical content that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think you'd accidentally put on Simon and Garfunkel.
He's the shining and the light without whom I cannot see. And his insurrection, he is might, he's the force that made me be.
Track 6, Mummy Dust. It's a strange track about money, both in praise of it, but also pointing out how pointless the acquisition of wealth is compared to the amount of time the average person will spend enjoying it. According to Papa, the greedy and ungrateful do not deserve their wealth. He will, and I quote, bury you in treasures just to feed your incapacity. And to society in general, he will pummel it with opulence, corpulence, and greed, before referencing a feast of rapacity. Not a fan of late-stage capitalism as our Papa. Despite still appearing to enjoy the corruption and stupidity that massive wealth seems to have the effect of. Jesus wouldn't be into all of this free market sin, but the average Fox viewer would fucking love it. So it's good to know that if nothing else, there is one thing that Papa and a Christian fundie could agree on. Money. Just as we will all become dust eventually, so does all the hoarded treasures that we step over the crawling hands of others to procure.
In God you trust, my mommy dust. Dust, my mommy dust.
Track 7, Majesty. A song about how great, powerful, majestic the Lord of Darkness is, and how small, pathetic and weak we are. Not much more to say about this one.
A higher power underground, from surf skies and down to chaos bound. He's sifting sacred and profound, in midst of sinners licking up to kiss his crown.
After Majesty is another instrumental, called Devil Church. First beginning with an organ, and then exploding into a euphoric burst of sound before literally falling apart as the final note detunes and fades before our ears. This leads us into the 9th track, Absolution, the first song that Ford wrote for Meliora. This song is another critique of materialism. Papa spends the whole song giddily reminding you that death is inevitable, and any goal you achieve will be brief. You can almost hear the delight in his voice as he revels in your tears of hopelessness.
Ever since you were born, you've been dying. Every day a little more, you've been dying. Dying to reach the setting sun.
10th and final track, Deus in Absentia. It wraps up Meliora with a baroque flair, starting off sounding somewhat like a show tune. This tells the tale of a soul that has reached the end of its time on earth, and at the gates is told that his benevolence was all in vain. There is no God, and all existence left is burning along with him for eternity. The symbolic hell that he'd been warned of is very real, and always was.
The world is on fire, and you are here to stay and burn with me. A funeral pyre, and we are here to revel forever.
A deluxe edition of Meliora was released shortly after the standard edition, which featured a bonus track called Zenith. It was curiously omitted from the original release of Meliora, for unknown reasons, despite sounding like it would have fit in pretty well thematically, and given a bit more substance to quite a short album. The song is about reaching that most potent level of power, as Papa narrates Satan's victory lap. Meliora was a huge step up for Ghost. Not only was the sound amped up, but the production value and imagery of Ghost's music videos and stage outfits was greatly invested in, and Meliora won the Swedish equivalent of the Grammy Award that year. No small feat for a Swedish metal band that the mainstream was only just opening up to. On the 16th of September 2016, Ghost unearthed their second EP, Popestar, this time including one original song amongst the covers. The original song was called Square Hammer, and just like Zenith, it was a track that was left off of Meliora despite being written around that time. This track is mostly about loyalty, order, and sacrifice. Papa takes on a Pied Piper persona in this that I'll admit even at times makes me want to fist bump the air in allegiance to Beelzy. Moving on to the covers, the first cover is Nocturnal Me, originally by Echo and the Bunnymen, written in 1984. A gloomy alternative rock tune that fits Ghost Aura very nicely. The Forge knows how to pick 'em.
In an ice-capped fire of burning wood, in a world of wire, ignite our dreams of starry skies.
The next cover is an odd one. I Believe by Simian Mobile Disco, a group known for electronic dance music. Ghost somehow turned this on its head completely, using harps and various other instruments to weave this into an ethereal Depeche Mode-like ambience.
And I believe that you could be what I need to believe. I believe. Oh, he just keeps coming round again.
Penultimate cover from Popestar is Missionary Man, originally by Eurythmics. Most of you who know of the group will have heard this song, an 80s synth-pop belter that celebrates sin and individuality. Ghost play this one mostly unchanged, just beefed up with guitars and given a bit more snark courtesy of Papa.
Well, I was born an original sinner. I was born from original sin. And if I had a dollar bill for all the things I've done, there'd be a mountain of money piled up to my chin.
Final cover of the EP is Bible. I honestly don't know much about the history of this one, but the few bits that I do know is that it's loosely based on a song by an obscure Swedish band called Imperiet, recorded in 1988, though the Imperiet version itself is based on a much older song. This era of the band closed on the 8th of December 2017 when they dropped their first live album, Ceremony and Devotion, recorded throughout their Popestar tour between 2016 and 2017. Hi, Mayumi here. Welcome to part 4 of my Ghost retrospective. This guy right here is Cardinal Copia. For this period of the band's history, he would succeed Papa Emeritus as the enigmatic frontman. His arrival had been planned for quite some time. If you watch the music video for Square Hammer, you will see a cardinal perched atop a tombstone. This didn't get noticed at the time, but in hindsight it is a clear reference to the retirement of Papa and the employment of Copia. Both of these characters are played by the real-life man behind Ghost, Tobias Forge, who has stated his reason for the change of guard is that he desired more mobility on stage. He feared that the heavy uniform worn by the static, imposing Papa would become stale as the years went on. And after Papa III's reduced attire and slicked back hair, Forge decided that Papa should keep his heavy coat and crown, and a new character should be created. Enter Cardinal Copia.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
News of the Cardinal's entrance was quickly followed by the regular upload of short videos on Ghost's official YouTube channel. These were kind of a mini-series taking you behind the lore of Ghost, a look behind the curtain at the wacky world of Ghost. And on the 1st of June 2018, the band's 4th album, Prequel, dropped, preceded by the release of its first single, Rats, which we will cover in a short bit. As usual, this album has a Latin title, Prequel, meaning roughly in English, to come before. Opus Eponymous had a theme of Genesis and prophecy, the coming of the Antichrist. Infastus Imam continued this concept, covering the conception and influence of the Antichrist. Meliora then showed us the conclusion of the Antichrist's master plan. Prequel now takes us back before all of this to the mid-1300s, when religious theocracy was at one of its more prevalent points in history, a time when the Black Death was violently sweeping throughout Europe, fueling the many fears and superstitions that the Church would capitalise on. This is the concept of Prequel, an album that shows that the more faithful of us will attribute tragedy to the devil rather than accepting the natural imperfections of our own world. Prequel begins with Ashes, a short opener sung by Tobias Forge's own daughter, Minnow. Starting with the direct reference to the Black Death, Ashes is a creepy rendition of the famous nursery rhyme Ring a Ring a Roses, which was sung by the children of the time as a grim reference to the surrounding sickness. This is followed by Rats. As previously mentioned, this was released prior to the album as the first promotional single. Rats are known carriers of disease, and historically were proven to be the carriers of the bubonic plague that was transmitted by infected fleas. The song also touches on the panic and paranoia of the general populace, who would blame all manner of things on the pandemic, such as demonic forces, lower-class peasants, foreign enemies poisoning the water supply, earthquakes releasing toxic fumes, and a nebulous concept they called night air that is mentioned elsewhere in Prequel. The music video for Rats is set in a modern American town that is infested with diseased rodents. Cardinal Copia dances amongst the dead like some dark parody of 80s cheesy dance films such as Fame and Grease. At the end of the video, a white horse is ridden by Copia. This is in reference to the horsemen of the apocalypse representing death.
Into your sanctum, you let them in. Now all your loved ones and all your kin will suffer punishments beneath the wrath of God.
Track 3. Faith. The reason faith exists can sometimes be present not because of one's allegiance with God, but the fear of the devil. This is the only song on Prequel that explicitly includes the devil as an entity rather than an idea. Therefore, when Cardinal Copia infers that the devil is observing the collective suffering and misery of mankind and is relishing in the calamity, he makes the point that faith, as in the concept of belief rather than allegiance, belongs to the devil. In short, this song is Satan gloating at the demise and mass hysteria of humanity. Track 4, See the Light. This track makes reference to the devil, but only the idea, not the entity. The institution that is Christianity has always made its money and gathered its followers on the premise of fear and hate, of anything or one that is not supported by the doctrine of the Church, such as the devil himself, but also not limited to sex, music, art, literature, alcohol, coffee, mixed fabrics, haircuts and shaving, shellfish, women, gays, other theocracies, non-whites, and Jesus, but not really anymore. In this track, Cardinal Copia explains that it is this irrational fear and hatred based on rigid theocracy that keeps the devil strong and persistently present in the minds of many throughout the centuries.
Every day that you feed me with hate, I grow stronger. Every day that you feed me with hate, I grow stronger.
There are rumours that Tobias conveys a double meaning within See the Light. He takes the opportunity to air his grievances with previous bandmates, the Nameless Ghouls, who only 2 years prior pulled him into a very stressful and drawn-out court dispute that they ultimately lost. and are still at the time of Christmas 2019 trying to appeal against, though this can be taken very literally in the song. When Tobias sings this next passage, I can't help but think it's directed at his disgraced goals.
Many a rat I befriended, and so many a thorn stood between. But of all of the demons I've known, none could compare to you.
This seems like a pretty sarcastic fuck you courtesy of Forge. For further information on the continuing saga of Forge vs the Gulls, please watch part 3 of this series, or find more sources around the internet. Track 5, Miasma. A bombastic instrumental full of punchy guitar riffs, synths, and a brilliant saxophone solo. The origin of the word miasma means an unpleasant odour. In the 1300s, during the period of time that was the Black Death, there was an outdated medical theory that the sickness was being caused by something they called night air, which was the general name given to areas of infection or high fatality rate. Track 6, Danse Macabre, is the second single from Prequel. The title is a reference to a tone poem by Camille Saint-Saëns. This was an orchestral piece that would be played during a spoken word performance or a poem of the time, sort of like royalty music of old. The piece contained the infamous tritone, also known as the Abolus in Musica, or the Devil in Music. Danse Macabre, as written by Ghost here on Prequel, also contains this tritone in tribute to the original piece. This was the second track on the album to have an accompanying music video. As the song conveys the mood of a party anthem, the music video is set at a debaucherous party, wherein we witness an ordinary actor who bears a striking resemblance to the real-life Tobias Forge become Papa. All 7 sins are referenced throughout the video, amongst scenes of dancing and general decadence.
Just wanna be with you in the moonlight. Just I wanna be with you all night.
Also, check out this awesome remix of Danse Macabre from an artist called Carpenter Brut, a pounding synthwave banger that gives you an entirely new way of enjoying the electrifying atmosphere that Danse Macabre gives you.
If I could turn back the time, I'd make alright. How can it end like this? There's a sting in the way you kiss me.
Track 7, Pro Memoria, meaning for memory, is a ballad about appreciating and accepting death, recognising one's own mortality. Forge stated at the time that he wanted to utilise the piano more heavily for this album. This and a later track called Life Eternal are the best examples that Prequel has of the piano leading the way as opposed to other instruments. It's time to greet death as a warm, kindly friend.
Don't you forget about dying. Don't you forget about your friend death. Don't you forget that you will die. Don't you forget about dying. Don't you forget about your friend death. Don't you forget that you will die.
Track 8, Witch Image. This track also touches upon the Black Death, but from the perspective of the Grim Reaper, who, while busy collecting the mountain of souls from the corpses brought forth by the plague, cynically asks, "You wouldn't want to live forever, right?" Another prominent theme in the song's lyrics refers to the Garden of Earthly Delights, a triptych painting divided into 3 sections representing Eden, Earth, and Gehenna.
You'd never want me to appear. You'd never want it to be over. You'd never want it to reach out to the edge of time.
Track 9, Helvetes Fönster, Swedish for Hell Window, is another instrumental featuring a prominent piano along with a full band and a number of synths working in tandem. Certain parts have a strong medieval vibe to them. The term Hell Window is related to a Puritan ideological belief that men who would peer into the openings of the sides of this dress, once worn by most women of the 1300s, would be looking into a hell window. Doing so was heavily frowned upon at the time due to its connection with lust. The 10th and final track is Life Eternal, a song that asks an important question. If you were offered immortality and took it, would you grow to regret it? Is a short but full life more valuable than one of endless nothingness?
Can you hear me say your name forever? Can you see me longing for you forever?
If you were lucky to own certain versions of Prequel, you'd also have two covers as bonus tracks, the first being a cover of Pet Shop Boys' It's a Sin, originally released in 1987 as an LGBT anthem. Ghost's rendition provides an added layer of religious persecution.
It's a sin. It's a sin. Everything I've ever done, everything I ever do, every place I've ever been, everywhere I'm going to, it's a sin.
The other cover was a version of the Leonard Cohen song Avalanche, originally released in 1971. Ghost's version takes a more epic and somber tone than the original.
You who wish to conquer pain, you must learn what makes me kind. The crumbs of love that you offer me, they're the crumbs I've left behind.
Prequel would manage to rack up 66,000 copies on its first week of release, reaching number 3 on the American Billboard 200. On September the 13th, 2019, Ghost released a limited edition 7-inch vinyl aptly named 7 Inches of Satanic Panic, consisting of only 2 songs. According to Ghost lore, 7 Inches is a release that had been recorded and archived since 1969. Tobias Forge was born in 1981, meaning that this claim is obviously false, but ghost lore gets very complicated and stretches back way further than the mastermind who orchestrates it. The first track, Kiss the Go-Go, gives us a psychedelic tale of naivety through a nostalgic haze. There was a music video for this track in which Copia adopts the aesthetic of a creepy mixture between the psychotic cult leader Jim Jones and the sexual magnetism and swagger of Jim Morrison.
Satan, Lucifer, Osculum Obscenum. Hey baby, kiss the ghost.
The second track, Mary on a Cross, serves as the B-side in keeping with the groovy goth sound of Go-Goat.
We were scanning the cities, rocking to pay the dues. But besides all the glamour, all we got was bruised.
We are now for the time being completely up to date. It has been quite the trip from their native Sweden all the way out to the farthest reaches of the world and back, and no less all in just 10 years. As we await the next chapter in Ghost's unholy crusade, including rumours of a new papa, the 4th in line, it is important to celebrate and revere the achievements and successes that the last 3 worked for. And to appreciate Tobias Forge for his extreme devotion to his cause, and to the growth of one of my favourite bands. Hope you had a great Christmas. I'll catch you on album number 5.
da da